babe. How are you doing? Oh, you're trying to go to sleep? Mm-mm. Do you have a headache or anything? Oh, I'm sorry, baby. Let's see. Oh, I have an idea. I had to study for my psych test. Yeah, it'll be okay. But why don't I sit on the bed and you can put your head on my lap and I'll play with your hair. And I'll just, I guess, whisper and talk about my notes and just read over them. So hopefully you'll fall asleep. Yeah, out of boredom or something. Does that sound like a plan? Okay, come here. Are you comfy? Good. Okay, so I'm gonna play with your hair and I'm gonna read over my notes. So just close your eyes. No, you can't look at me. Close your eyes, okay? Good. Okay. So, there's something called cognitive psychologists, and they basically study the ways that people perceive information, how we learn and remember things, how we learn language, and how we solve problems. Yeah. And there's something called a behavioral neuroscientist. The primary focus is the brain, and it involves brain imaging techniques, and they study how the brain is involved in learning, emotion, and behavior. And then there's a personality psychologist, and it considers what makes people's behaviors unique and consistent over time and in a different social setting. Let's see. And there's clinical psychology. Yeah, it's like the biggest one. And it focuses on diagnosing and the treatment of mental, emotional, and behavioral disorders. Let's see. So education psychologists, and they basically just study the way students learn and the effectiveness of particular teaching techniques. And there's industrial psychologists, organizational psychologists, and so on. Modern psychology, it began around 1850. Let's see. And you probably heard of Sigmund Freud. He developed psychoanalysis. That's cool, isn't it? He also talked about the Oedipus complex. How fun, right? Let's see. A bunch of big words. Something called an empirical method, and it's based on observation, including experimentation. And then there's a man called William James. Said psychology's purpose was to study the function of the behavior in the world, also known as functionalism. Focused on how mental activities helped an organism fit into its environment. Kind of like the whole mind instead of individual parts. And then Sigmund Freud created psychoanalytic theory, and it focuses on the role of a person's unconscious and early childhood experiences. And then you got Pavlov with its classical conditioning, and so on. And then you got B.F. Skinner. He created the Skinner box, and it was basically a chamber that isolates the subject from the external environment. Let's see. And then you have the hierarchy of needs, The first one is psychological, which includes food, water, shelter, warmth. And then security, such as safety, employment, assets. And then social, which includes family, friendship, intimacy. Yes, like you, like us. And belonging. And then esteem, self-worth, accomplishments, and confidence. And then self-actualization, which is basically inner fulfillment. Let's see. Okay. And then back to cognitive psychology. It focuses on studying cognitions or thoughts and their relationship to our experiences and actions. So research interests range from attention to problem solving to language to memory. And then you got developmental psychology. It's the study of development across a lifespan. And there's also something called object permanence. It's why babies, you can play peekaboo with them. They're always so surprised to see you. Then you have personality psychology. It focuses on patterns of thoughts and behaviors that make each individual unique. And then research is taking a more quantitative approach, and it's focused on identifying personality traits. There's something called the 5-factor model. And it has 5 traits. So there's openness, conscientiousness. You can't laugh at me. You're supposed to be sleeping. Extroversion, agreeableness, and eroticism. Let's see. So, social psychology focuses on how we interact with and relate to others. Stanley Milgram research was conducted on obedience. Most psychologists agree that few people would be willing to inflict pain simply because they're obeying orders. And basically he found that nearly 2/3 of his participants were willing to deliver quote-unquote lethal, because they're fake, shocks to another person simply because an authoritative figure told them to. So that was interesting. Kind of sad, right? And then you have health psychology, and it says focus on how health is affected by the interaction of biological and psychological and social stuff. So, this is just talking about sciencey things like data, variables, descriptive studies, case studies, naturalistic observations, surveys. meta-analysis, correlation studies, a lot of scatter plots, the negative coefficients or positive coefficients, and experimental studies are considered true experiments. And then true experiments are required for casual relationships in the world. Independent variables, dependent. Self-report. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see. Ooh, this is talking about, let's see, how DNA molecules are spooled together into a double helix and coiled together to form a chromosome. And genes are simply segments of the DNA, the double helix. And it holds the information to build and maintain an organism's cells. Let's see. We are different from our parents because of random genetic mutations that occur when cells divide. Let's see. In a gene by environment study, researchers directly measure genetic variation that occurs in a specific gene found in different people as a consequence of those people living in different environments. Genotypes, phenotypes, yada yada. Ooh. Wakefulness is the degree to which a person is awake or asleep. When we are asleep or dreaming, we are considered to be moderately conscious. The brain is very active during sleep, and beta waves are dominant during wakeful periods, and alpha waves are dominant when we are drowsy. Let's see, most people dream numerous times each night, but typically we do not remember our dreams on awakening. So now it's your turn to be moderately conscious and to have good dreams, okay? My sleeping baby. Sleep well, okay? I love you. I always love you, and I always will. So sleep well for me.